What we're in the business of doing is creating assets to be bought. That's without a doubt. We're taking the zero value to the millions of dollars value to $50 million today, to hundreds of millions of dollars when we've got millions of ounces in the ground. I've been looking for gold around the world, and the hottest ground is 100 kilometers north of me. So guess what an entrepreneur is going to do? He's going to go and look for opportunity, and what anyone says about exploration, it's not about the rocks, it's about people. And there's walk-up drill targets, there's better drill holes in some of these projects in Australia than we've got in Finland. And Finland's a bloody good project.
Welcome to Crux Investor. We spoke earlier today to Michael Hudson, the CEO of Mawson Resources. They've got a gold copper asset in Finland. They've also got some options in Australia and the US. We have a frank discussion about his entrepreneurial spirit, their business plan, and what point he thinks it makes sense for him to exit the business. If you want to look at some of the topics we discussed, look in the description below and you can click on the relevant timestamp and I'll take you to that part of the video. If I can ask that you click the button in the corner of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, please click the notification bell. Anyway, let's hear what Michael had to say. Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Matthew, from a twilight here down under.
Exactly, so I do appreciate you taking time at the end of the day to talk to us. Looking forward to this. We don't get many Finnish stories on here, so why don't we kick off with a 1-minute summary and we'll pick it up from there.
Finnish story told by an Australian, so it should be perfect. Now, I'm here to talk about Mawson Resources, which is a TSX listed gold exploration company. We've been focusing in the Nordics for a long time now, since 2004. I've had over 20 years in that part of the world. We're a gold exploration company with a discovery we made from first principles up in the north of Finland, and we've been drilling like crazy up there, and we still are at the moment. So it's an exploration story pivoting to initial resources and resource expansion.
Beautiful. Okay, so it's a gold story, which obviously very topical at the moment. People are excited about gold stories, but can we start off with just a few of the other variables just to kind of get them out of the way? Okay, Finland, mining. Not many people know much about Finland, so is it a good jurisdiction? Who's there? What are they doing?
Yeah, they didn't know a lot about Finland outside of the Nordics until relatively recently, and I think it's become a new mini Klondike compared to where I saw it, let's say back in the early 2000s. So really the brief history of Nordic mining and Finnish mining is that it's over 400 years old. Mining has helped them recover at various stages of their history, and it was mainly focused on iron ore and base metals. And right up until Finland and Sweden, for that matter, joined the EU, you had to have majority local ownership. So commercial foreign interest didn't come in, and it was mainly government-run companies or state companies and the government that mainly did the exploration in Finland's case. So it had different outcomes. Good outcomes, they found a lot of mineralization, and it's one of the most mineralized parts of the world. It's got the right rocks, and they found a lot of good mines. And I think an example of that history is that approximately, they say 90% of underground mines in the world have either Finnish or Swedish technology. So it's built up a very big technological arm around them, and that's because they're smart and efficient. But they decided that basically those state companies had found everything in the early 90s when they joined the EU, and it was opened up for foreign exploration. The other bit of information is that back in the 80s was really the first time that gold was started to be looked for. I think in 87 was the first gold exploration. So a Paleoproterozoic greenstone belt, 99% covered under tills, so not a lot of outcrop, was essentially unexplored for gold, essentially unexplored. And then nothing much happened in our business in the 90s. There was a bit of a boom, but it was a bit too early. Few people went in. A lot of the majors went in, the Rios and the BHPs. But it was really only in the last go round, 2005-6 to 2011, that Finland and Sweden really started to take off. I used to go and tell this story and talk about saunas and ABBA, and it's just more than that. But now people get that these are mining countries. I mean, there's a lot of miners up there now, so a lot of the major miners have come into the country. Agnico's longest life mine, Europe's largest mine, is Kittilä, which is just north of us, in Lappish terms, 120 or 30 kilometres north of us. We've got Goldcorp and now Newmont, who have invested in us. V2 are there. Rio just did a deal with another company just south of us. There's Boliden, who's the Swedish major. So there's a hell of a lot of majors working in that part of the world now, as well as active juniors.
Okay, so that's good news, and that also suggests that the access to licensing permits, that's a well-trodden path. Is it a quick process? Have you had any difficulties? You've heard of something in here which I've never seen before. It's like you've got day permit for drilling and summer permits and winter permits, which is, I'd never heard that before. Why the difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've gone through the Finnish permitting hoops over the years. Now, firstly, we've been permitted now for 4 years for drilling and another 2 years ahead of us. So we've been permitted for 6 years. But there was a history to Mawson that it was hard for us to get permits. There was a period in Finnish time where there was a massive failure in Finland, owned by a Finnish run company that listed in London. It was called Talvivaara. Everyone bailed or came into the project because it was the green bio heap leach project. Then it spent lots of money and it failed. And then mining went on the nose. The Greens had the balance of power. The Minister for Environment was from the Greens, and it became a very difficult political climate in the early 2010 to 13 timeframe. And that's when we found this project and we're trying to go gangbusters permitting it, and it took a long time.
So that's not that long ago, 2010, 2013. The Greens are a big force in the Nordics, obviously. You're not worried about any of that raising its head again, are you?
Oh, it's always there, and you've got to do your very best and operate with the better than world's best practice, essentially. I mean, you could imagine that you could not imagine how we operate up there. And some of our ground is in what is called Natura 2000, which is a biodiversity area for Europe. There have been mines opened in these areas. About 20% of our exploration license is in Natura. 30% of the whole of Lapland is in Natura. So it's certainly harder to get permits in those areas. And if they're muddy and swampy, that's why we're only permitted to drill where it's frozen and where we can get access and not chop up the ground in those areas. Where it's not so muddy and outside those areas, we can get all year access.
Okay, so these conservation areas are a little bit more restrictive than, obviously outside the conservation areas. I mean, tell us about some of the things that you have to do. I mean, to me, when you have to do extra things, it's extra cost. So is it prohibitive in some instances, or what's the workarounds?
Well, like I said, there's mines opened in these areas. They're biodiversity areas that are established by the EU. 20% of Europe's landmass was designated to go into these areas when each country joined the EU. So it's a wide program, and really one that Europe has to work around in so many ways. So we have winter-only permitting. It's very swampy, so that's really realistic. So we can drill from December to April in those areas. We have to leave zero footprint. Basically, we have to collect all our cuttings, which is a standard practice through Finland that we apply anywhere. We operate the same inside and outside of those areas, but certainly we have to do a lot more environmental mapping to establish what's there and what we're doing and if we're affecting that. And that's where we're going for zero impact, of course. Now, if we're ever going to mine in those areas, it won't be zero impact. It will be minimizing impact, and then it will need a biodiversity swap. So picking an equivalent area outside the program, buying it, putting that in, and excising this area.
Okay, well, maybe let's park that for now. I was just sort of interested in some of the differences between sort of conventional mining you might find elsewhere in the world versus how do you operate in Finland? Because I don't know much about Finland.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that? Because It's an interesting fact that we've got a large EU funding also through Horizon 2020. And for people outside of Europe, they won't really understand the European mentality, but it's very much funding and across all the countries and trying to find solutions for Europe. And Finland is a huge supplier of cobalt in the world, refined cobalt. So something like 80% of refined cobalt comes out of China. Of that 20% that comes out of non-China, half of that comes from Finland, from the world's largest cobalt refinery. They've got battery chemical plants, and they've got BASF there. They play a huge role in the battery supply chain. So our project can be very much a major contributor to that from the mining aspect and adding locally sourced cobalt, because it's cobalt with gold as a byproduct. And that's really important, because even though they produce half of the non-Chinese refined cobalt in the world, 90% of that cobalt comes from the Congo, and child labor and unethically sourced cobalt and the like. So that works to the European mentality totally. And then critically, it allows us to have the resources of a major while still operating like a junior. So what I mean is smart people. We've got tens and tens at times of academics and smart industry people on this project that we just couldn't have if we were with the scarce resources that we have with our own funds.
Okay, let's come back to that later, because I think there's a lot of battery metal stories going at the moment. People telling us what they're going to put into batteries and how they're part of the European EV revolution story. So I do want to hear that. But let's start with, what was it that you set out to build? Because you're sort of back where in share price wise, you're back where you were a year ago. I know you've been doing a lot of drilling, and you're going to tell me all about that in a second. You've got a bit of a bump recently in the share price, so people are listening again. But let's start from the beginning. What was the business plan day one?
Day one, it was a couple of geologists sitting on a hill in Peru saying we should become entrepreneurs back in the late 90s, and then we spent 3 or 4 or 5 years being told to bugger off, basically, because we thought it was all about ideas, and that was the school of hard knocks during that downturn. That's when we started Mawson. We started it on a joint venture in Sweden. Now, what really was the business plan? It was simply to find something. What really turns my crank is discovery. And if you ask most geologists, I started with metal detectors on beaches, and the thrill of the hunt. So when I found a commercial way after spending a decade in a major company being very well trained, I thought this was a wonderful business to get into. Now, it took a long time to learn the commercial aspects, and I'm much more involved in the commercial side of the business. But I've still got the geological head, and I'm still involved at a very intimate level with all our operations, but not operating them myself day to day. So we went through, and now you can go forward a long time, and exploration is a de-risking business. And that's really what we're in the business of doing. And you don't want a geologist to spend $1 more on a project if they're starting to prove it isn't there. And the capital market's a very bad model for discovery, because people tend to hang around on projects too long because it's very hard to walk. They'll keep drilling holes that are market holes rather than true, bold, and considered discovery holes through the process. So it's a very hard market to actually discover in. But we turned over lots of projects, and we've been up and down, and we've been through a variety of cycles. And the history of this project specifically is that we were a uranium company. And we knew Areva, the state-based French nuclear utility, and they, at the end of the global financial crisis, were pulling out of a whole lot of countries, and they said, we know you guys, we like you guys, would you like to buy our Finnish and Russian portfolio? And we said, thank you, we'll have your Finnish portfolio. Didn't have any idea really what was in it. We thought we did. And I went down to Paris, and they showed all the uranium, and then sort of at the end of the project, at the end of the presentation, they came out with 30 samples that went literally over percent levels of gold, over 10,000 parts per million, and it was staggering. Didn't believe it. Thought the uranium guys had no idea where to put commas and decimal points, and And, subsequently rolled forward, we took the project, we sold all the uranium, spun out projects that we had into Peru into new companies, focused on this project, drilled Europe's best drill hole that still stands 10 years later. It's 6 meters at 600 grams. Found some challenges in that part of the system because it was nuggety and hard to put together. Put the boots on, did a lot of shoe leather walking, and found 8 kilometers away this system that we're drilling now. And that was around 2013-14. A few years to permit it, and really, because only money has been available in the last few years, it's been the last 2 years where a majority of the dollars, 80% of the dollars, has gone into this project.
Right. Okay. But I guess what I'm trying to work out is when you had that conversation in Paris, and you looked at this as a gold project first of all, right? So you're saying, okay,
and it is today too.
Right. Okay. And I mean, what's your track record in gold? I mean, get your junior mining gold. Or do you think that's not relevant?
Well, I'd found a little deposit in Australia. And then actually when the company that I was working for went into receivership, a company called Pasminco, we bought all the data from Pasminco back in the early 2000s from the receivers, and that was the best data package in South America. So we seeded a number of companies at the time with projects, gold projects. So we had 4 or 5 years there, including Chariots and the Alex Black and those guys. We were their grassroots arm. So we had that was sort of the morphing from the big company to data to ideas, and so I knew gold and had known gold pretty well there. And remember, I was 20 years into my career at that stage too. So
right, okay. So what I'm trying to do is paint this picture of you, because you said you learned a few things along the way. You picked up some commercial acumen, right? So what have you learned along the way which is going to allow you to kind of create value, genuine value for this project? Because I say, up until beginning of this year, this was a $20 million company. So what's the process for you as CEO now of building this up? Because there's a lot of drilling going on. I'm seeing lots of drill numbers. They're good numbers, but how do you build the story from here for the market?
Yeah, it's a really good question as to how can you create value through discovery through the cycle. And I touched on it before that it's very difficult to create just value at all points of the cycle because you can't beat the market. You cannot beat the market, but you can create asset value. And you've got to find people who understand that. You've got to be able to articulate the story. You've got to have a question to solve, so you can answer all your questions here about the geology. Nobody understands geology. Geologists don't understand geology, really, right? We're second guessing and with some good science. But what have you answered, and what do you need to answer next to get to the next value stage, whether it's a resource or expanding a body or whatever that may be. And if you can't articulate that, number one, then you're all over the shop and it's hard to find money. And we had this deposit, and we've been very well supported. It's got a very unique shareholder base, and we've had to refresh that over the years too, as shareholders have changed, their circumstances have changed, of course, and so that's meant that what people came into the story for, you can't bring new people into for. So you've literally got to articulate that pathway through. And the big change for us on this project specifically only happened late last year when we cracked the code. Essentially, now you have geologists telling you you're cracking the code, you should have your skeptical hat on. But we actually cracked the code better than we ever have before, and that's because we did a lot of drilling. We've got a lot of smart people on the project.
What does that mean when you say you cracked the code? What was the problem? What was the question you were answering then, which has allowed people to understand what it is that you're going to be doing? So tell me about that.
Yeah, so basically we had a gold project. Nobody doubted that it had a huge potential. We found 6 kilometers of outcropping gold. We drilled Europe's best drill hole, as I've mentioned, and then we've gone and found another part of the system. Mm-hmm. It was huge. It was gold dripping out of the area where there's very little outcrop. But we had, before we cracked the code, gold everywhere without a real understanding of how we were going to monetize that, how we were going to de-risk it. I mentioned it's all about de-risking and make sure each drill hole counted as much as it could. And that doesn't mean hitting all the time, because if you don't get a miss, you don't know where to go to find it, right? So, but how could we be predictive and have a predictive model? And we thought we did all along the path, but it was changing. But basically we had spaghetti, and then we found these nice planar linear bodies that went through that spaghetti and took away the spaghetti and all the noise, and we were able to follow these planar bodies, and now that's what we're drilling for. We put resources on top of these planar bodies, and now we're extending those bodies to depth over multiple areas.
Okay, so you've just got a better idea of what's going on underground. That's what you mean by cracking the code.
Well, the geological code, what are the controls on high-grade gold? And articulating that is a key, and people can see, well, this could get bigger. You got 500,000 ounces there. I can see this going to 1 million ounces after this next drill program. And then I can see another few million ounces there if everything comes. And these are sophisticated people that you're always talking to in terms of these capital raises. So they know the risks of exploration. But if you can de-risk it with a clear, simple story and articulate it, then probably you've got a better chance.
Absolutely. So let's just stay on that bit for a second. Okay, so you've got circa 500,000 ounces at the moment. You want to obviously build that up. So how much drilling have you done to date to be able to get you to 500,000 ounces?
500,000 was 15 kilometres of drilling back in December 2018. When we put our new resource out in August or thereabouts, late summer this year, we'll have tripled those meters. We'll be up to 45 kilometers, okay? So we put 30 additional kilometers into the body before with this resource upgrade. So that's a significant amount of meters, and you can start to see the following of the numbers and how they'll piece together. And it's never a straight line in exploration, but so far so good that the model's holding up, and we're finding gold. Okay,
so how many meters have you done so far versus how many you're going to do by the end of August?
So we've only got 40 kilometers into the body now, and we've only got 5 left to finish this program. So we're nearly there.
Okay, and what do you hope that's going to give you?
Well, with all the caveats, because I can't talk about resources, but I can talk about exploration targets and ranges, and we put those in our presentations. We see a target between 1 million to 1.2 million ounces, and with a similar grade that we ideally had before, which was around 2.5 grams gold open pit and around 4.5 grams gold underground grades. So that's what we had before, and if the bodies continue to build like we have in the upper bits, the proof of concept resource, then that's where we're.
Okay, so and again, I'm learning all the time here, so which is great. With 2 to 3 grams, your plan, the model, is to keep building out the resource till it reaches a level at which you think you can start looking around the economics of getting into production, right? You're not going to go early on that.
Well, here's the thing that and this is, that we've got mining engineers are now on this project for the first time. You can imagine how that's changing the team and the focus and the skill base that you need to bring into a team. And they're the questions we're asking internally, because, the rule of thumb is that people say 2 million ounces is the minimum that you need to get a mid-tier interested. That's about right, with another million or two on the table, right? And that, if we look at Kittler, it's a really good example. The Kittler is Europe's biggest gold mine today, run by Agnico. It's got 40 years mine life, Agnico's largest mine life, and they're just north of us, as I mentioned earlier. They started it with a maiden resource of 300,000 ounces, so smaller than we've got. Then Agnico bought it. There was no other resource upgrade. 6 months after they bought it, they came out with 2 million ounces. And then lots of drilling and lots of work. It's now 7 million ounces going to 10. And that's the way these things are built, right? So Agnico are clever operators, and they saw the ounces that have essentially come for free through exploration, even though they paid the price for what was in the ground at the time that they could see. And that's where we're going now. So we've got this runway, 500,000, 1 million to 2 million, and then beyond. And this could be a very large system, a multi-million ounce system. It's not limited by anything to date, but it needs a lot more work. So the other point of that question is, and I'm giving you longer answers than probably you want,
fine.
is that the risk of permitting in the first world in Europe is high, no doubt. And I've talked about the challenges up front about exploration, and I should mention, if we don't get into that we've got huge local support. And if you don't have local support on a project, you're dead in the water. So that's a key point. But do we start permitting this earlier? That's something that's not going to fit the 200,000 ounces a year production profile of a Agnico, or the 500,000 ounces a year production profile of a Newmont, and we start to find something that's economic, permit it, still continue to make it bigger, but de-risk it, and not spend $100 million building a 3 to 4 million ounce deposit. And that's what we're really looking at now, and it's early because we're still drilling and trying to create that resource base. But they're all the questions that we're asking internally now.
That is a fantastic insight. Thank you for that. People are always intrigued by how long. Some companies will continue to drill, keep drilling, build up a resource, and that usually involves a lot of dilution. Some other companies look at different business models, which is how do we get into production and get some cash flow going early, or as you say, just to reduce the risk component around permitting and additional licenses. So fascinating. Thank you for that. Can I ask about some of the other projects that you've got in Finland? Obviously you're developing some. You've got a few other options in the pipeline. What's the Western USA? What does that relate to?
Yeah, the Western USA project was a hedge, basically. We've got when we were facing permitting issues in Finland, and it wasn't clear that those permits were going to come through in a timely manner, and we saw a gap of 1 to 2 years potentially that didn't happen,
right.
And hasn't happened. Doesn't look like it will happen. So we went looking for another project, and we have an agreement with the largest landholder in the US. Landholders in the US hold the mineral rights, and actually we've drilled on a really interesting early stage epithermal system, but we're not spending $1 on that, and we haven't spent $1 on that for the last year. We see that as just a bit of a tough one in competing in absolute sense to Finland.
Okay.
Now you're going to ask me about Australia.
I am. How did you know? I know you've got an option and a JV going on there, but tell us, why did you do that? Is it same as the USA?
No, it wasn't the same as the USA, because we kept the USA under wraps and worked that up slowly. We've come out all guns blazing on this Australian acquisition from pre-closing, and that's because this is a significant project. It's not just starting from first principles trying to work up a project. Now the truth is also, I know Australia very well. I've got afflicted with this accent. I've known about the Fosterville style of mineralization for many years. I vended a number of projects into this company that we did the deal with many years ago. I followed it. I knew it. And it's been an irony that I've been looking for gold around the world, and the hottest ground is 100 kilometers north of me. So guess what an entrepreneur is going to do? He's going to go and look for opportunity, and what anyone says about exploration, it's not about the rocks, it's about people, and you back good people, and all that. That's a cliche, but without a doubt, you back good people in life, and surround yourself with good people. And so I knew some good people who had these projects, and there was a window of opportunity. Now, where should a project go that me and my team worked up in our minds? And it didn't take a lot of time, and it was negotiation, and then we had talk with a lot of the shareholders. And the universal, not every shareholder, and of course we didn't talk to every shareholder, but the majority was, why would Mike Hudson paper up himself and his mates in a new company when this benefit should go to Mawson? It tags in, it's the hottest ground in the world, you're in the backyard so you can operate it, it's not trying to go try and do something. and it's got a much more marketability than a gold project in Oregon, for example, right? And I don't want to pick on Oregon because that fitted a purpose, and that somebody will find a great deposit in Oregon one day. It just won't be us. But here we've got the opportunity here to really do something. And
how much have you spent? What have you got, and what are you going to do, and how much time are you going to devote to the Australian assets?
Yeah, well, at the moment, Finland is the absolute flagship. That's where 50 million of our market cap comes from. 5 million of our market cap comes from Australia. We've raised money on Finland. We'll continue to explore Finland, but we haven't spent a cent on Australia yet, other than brain power and a bit of due diligence. Now that will change soon, very soon. We're closing this in March, this acquisition, but it's a relatively cheap deal. It was something like less than 5% of Mawson's share capital. So we issued some stock. We paid $500,000 for one project outright, and now we're committed to $1 million on two projects, so $2 million over 5 years. Okay. So that could be done out of Treasury today without too much sweat. But the point is that we see this as an augmentation, not a pivot, because people say, well, what the hell, they're getting another project. Is Finland got a whole heap of problems that we don't know about? Not the case, and the results in Finland that we put out and will continue to put out will show that. So we're going to work these projects up, work out what we've actually got. I know what we've got, but we've got to articulate the story, ask the questions, see what gaps are there. And there's walk-up drill targets. There's better drill holes in some of these projects in Australia than we've got in Finland. And Finland's a bloody good project. So the projects here are very interesting. And we don't drill a lot during the Finnish summer because of those permitting winter timeframes. So by the time we finish in Finland, there's always a gap. So that's where these projects could potentially come into play. I mentioned we've spun projects out of Mawson. We've done joint ventures. We've started new companies. We're entrepreneurs at heart that have exploration and trying to create value through exploration in our blood. So when this starts to become a larger spending exercise, we've got the question to ask, is it best coming from raising money? And we'll ask people at that time whether it should be in Mawson or not. Now, there's lots of options here. Finland is going to be a much better project, becoming more Finnish than less Finnish. And I could say that about any project on earth, but it needs a local listing. I'd love to get the state mining company invested in Finland. That will only happen if we're listed in Finland. So should we list Finland and Mawson becomes a majority shareholder, but we put that into the Finnish market there and concentrate on these projects in the southern part of the world. So lots of options.
Yeah, definitely lots of options. Lots of options. Now, you keep describing yourself as an entrepreneur. Is that what you think defines a good exploration miner? You've got to be entrepreneurial, or do you need to be a little bit more methodical?
I was schooled in a very strong technical base. I try to put the smartest people around me, so I'm no spiv, and I hope I'm not coming across as one today to you there, Matthew. But likewise, good technical people don't make good managers of junior exploration companies. Good geologists don't make good exploration managers. You need the commercial sense and spirit, and you need to have the skill and courage to continue on what is, the biggest roulette wheel in terms of geology and the science of geology. It's hard, right? And so you've got to make big decisions with little bits of information. And that doesn't come from being overly technical alone, but you must be technical and have a good. So I think geologists make the best managers of these companies until they start to become redundant, and that redundancy is when you need to change the skill base of these companies or sell the project.
Okay, so we're getting into a fascinating area here. So you think that, well, you're telling me your focus is nearly 100% on Finland and what you're doing there. You believe in that project. You are taking optionality in the US where you're not spending money, but more so in Australia where you see the potential there. But it's kind of a little bit, not quite flexi time, but the summer and winter programs allow you to focus the relevant amount of time and attention on each. Well, so I guess what I'm trying to get, when people say entrepreneurial to me, it kind of makes me a bit, occasionally it makes me nervous because people getting distracted by shiny new object over here and not finishing project number one, which in your case is Finland. So do you think you're guilty of that, or do you think it's a case of, no, you know what the process needs to be, you know where you guys need to get this to, and then you will exit? Or have you got plans to take this into production?
That's a big question all around. Of course, I'm going to answer no. We know what we're doing, and I truly believe we do. We're focused sharply on Finland, without a doubt. But if that entrepreneurial geologist, wasn't sitting in Paris back in 2010. This asset that's going to be a multi-million ounce asset in Finland wouldn't have been created. And that's really where we're starting at first principles in Australia. And we just need to see where the market is and what the asset is and what we've got. And we'll make the right decision around creating value for shareholders through discovery, not defocus. And I said before, really what we're in the business of doing is creating assets to be bought. That's without a doubt. We're taking the zero value to the millions of dollars value to $50 million today, to hundreds of millions of dollars when we've got millions of ounces in the ground, to hopefully in a market, and let's pray that there's a better market ahead of us, and that's a hope, and that's not a strategy. That's just a hope. We plan for the worst, but in those times when you've got the top tier asset that is advanced and advancing towards production, and you've got something that looks what the majors need, then that's when you maximize your value. And these values of multi-million ounce deposits can range from $500 million to $1.5 billion, depending on, and no difference between the asset, just the time. So
okay.
That's
okay.
Huge.
You talk about bringing the right skill sets in at the right time. So you're telling me you're the right guy now. At what point do you think you're going to need to bring new people in to move this project forward?
Well, I've taken projects through to pre-feasibility in major companies and junior companies, and that's really, I think, where it starts to get to the limit of my skill base. I know I spent 3 years underground mining. I know about mining, but I'm not a miner. I know enough to say that. So that's probably when a mining engineer, and they say, just a little joke is that a geologist runs a mine until it gets into problems. The mining engineer comes along, fixes it up, and then when the mine really is starting to become tired and old, the accountants come in. So there's somewhere along that line a bit earlier that we need to think about all those different skills.
Okay, no, that's great. Now you've talked about your commitments to Australia. You've got a couple of $1 million. You've got your own G&A in Finland, etc. You got, what are you sitting on, about $5 million in cash at the moment?
Yeah, north of that, but we're spending it quickly with 5 rigs turning in Finland.
Right. So next question. You know what's coming. When's the next?
Yeah. So we'll end up. The question is, how much will we end up with by the end of this drill program? And we'll end up with around 2 million Canadian in the bank by May, which will give us enough to operate. But of course, there's going to be a need for more capital. In fact, what Finland needs within this current permitting period, which is this summer and then winter, because we can do some drilling in summer, it's not completely off limits, but is another $15 million to get to that plus 2 million ounce target. And I don't think that will come in one hit, of course. You don't dilute these companies, and we've had this company since 2004 and kept it pretty tight. It's been tough but we're very aware of the Canadian share capital story. I mean, a lot of people hear this accent and think paper will be thrown at them with the Australian model, but not the case. So we'll be looking for more money, and that will be about the right time for Australia also, and we'll have that much better articulated and the opportunity, and then we'll see what the breakdown is. But clearly, we're onto a good thing here that can, on that pathway of discovery and value creation in Finland.
That's fantastic first introduction to the story. I quite like it. I mean, I was aware of it, about 12, 18 months ago. have been following it. Looks like things are finally starting to take hold. I know it's a tricky market, so I'll be intrigued when you start having these conversations to try and understand if you can get this money in, this next bit of cash in, and how that comes in. But please stay in touch, Michael. It's been a delight. We haven't spoken to each other for a couple of years, but it's nice to see that things are heading in the right direction. As you say, long may that continue.
Thank you, Matthew. It's a pleasure, as always, to do it formally over the video, and I hope and wish you all the best of success in what you're doing here. And I don't look at many technical or stories out there, but I enjoy looking at your stories. So I trust that came across in this one.